Everything we've covered so far you owned or you lent. An option is neither. You're buying a right that expires, and if you never use it, the money is simply gone. The SEC calls the premium non-refundable, and that word is where most option questions live. And there's a second person in every one of these contracts who has no right at all, only a duty, and understanding what they're being paid for unlocks half the section. This is where the general routines from the last few episodes stop working. Options need their own machinery, and it's worth building it carefully.
Leo here, and the SEC's definition is the anchor. Options are contracts giving the owner the right to buy or sell an underlying asset at a fixed price on or before a specified future date.
Maya here, the right, not the obligation. That single word separates an option from every other product on this exam.
Because a bond obliges the issuer to pay and obliges you to lend. An option obliges the owner to do nothing at all. You may act and you may walk away.
Then the two kinds. A call option grants the buyer the right to buy shares of an underlying stock at the strike price for a specified period of time.
And a put grants the right to sell shares at the strike price for a specified period. Call is buy, put is sell.
And the strike price is the fixed number in both. The SEC describes it as the price at which the buyer may buy the underlying stock if it's a call, or sell it if it's a put. And notice what an option is written on rather than what it's. It's a contract about a stock, and the stock carries on existing whether or not the contract does. That's what makes it a derivative. Its value is derived from something else, and it has no life of its own once the underlying is taken away.
One price, two directions, depending on which contract you hold.
Then what it costs. The premium is the price per share you pay to purchase the option contract. And the SEC is blunt that it's non-refundable.
Per share, and one contract is typically 100 shares. So a premium quoted at $2.20 is a $220 payment.
And the expiration date is the day the option contract expires. After that, the right is gone whether you used it or not.
Bella, so why would anybody sell one? They take a small payment and hand somebody a right they can use against them for months.
One thing before the next part, and then we move right on. If any of this is clicking, tap that like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell for the next one. It takes a second, it costs nothing, and it helps more than you would think. Maya asked why anybody sells one, and it's the question that makes options make sense because so far we've only described one side of the contract.
It needs someone who works on how these contracts are actually priced and risked.
Professor Duran studies how derivative contracts allocate risk between the two sides and picked out Maya's question before we started.
Maya is describing the contract correctly and then drawing the wrong conclusion. The seller, who is called the writer, does take on an obligation with no right attached. If the buyer exercises, the writer must perform. That's genuinely one-sided.
So why do it?
Because the writer is paid the premium immediately and keeps it whatever happens, and the buyer's right expires. Most options are never exercised, which means the writer very often collects the payment and is never called upon at all.
So it's income in exchange for accepting a risk that frequently doesn't arrive.
And it's worth being concrete about what unbounded actually means for a writer, because the phrase gets used loosely. Somebody who wrote a call without owning the shares has promised to deliver stock at a fixed price no matter what it costs them to buy it. There's no ceiling on that purchase price, which is the whole reason the position is restricted.
Which is the same trade shape you've met 3 times already in this section. Somebody accepts a defined risk for a defined payment. What's unusual here is how asymmetric the two sides look.
Say more about that asymmetry because it's the thing the exam tests hardest.
The buyer of any option can lose exactly the premium and not a penny more. That's the entire downside, and it's known before you start. The writer's exposure isn't bounded in the same way, and on some positions, it's very large indeed.
So the buyer has a small known loss, and the writer has a small known gain.
and an unknown potential loss, which is why writing options is restricted in ways that buying them isn't, and why the exam asks about maximum loss so relentlessly. It's the number that separates the two roles.
Is there an honest defense of writing them, or are we just describing a bad idea? And there's a consequence of that asymmetry worth naming because it explains a rule people meet in practice. A firm will let almost anyone buy an option because the worst case is known and small. Writing one, particularly without owning the shares, requires approval and margin because the worst case is neither.
And I'd resist calling it a bad idea. A writer who already owns the shares is in a completely different position from one who doesn't because they can deliver what they promised out of what they hold. That's a conservative income strategy used by very ordinary investors. Naked writing without the underlying is the one that carries the frightening arithmetic.
Professor Duran, thank you. Buyer risks the premium, writer risks the position, is the sentence I'd want somebody to carry.
There are 4 positions in the whole of basic options, and people try to memorize 4 separate facts when there are really only 2 questions.
And once you see it as 2 questions, the 4 fall out and you never need the table again.
Question 1. Are you the buyer or the writer? The buyer holds a right. The writer holds an obligation.
Question 2. Is it a call or a put? A call is about buying the stock. A put is about selling it.
So take them in turn. Buy a call and you hold the right to buy at a fixed price. You want the stock to go up so that the right to buy cheaply is worth having.
Bullish. That's the one everybody starts with. So is buying a put the same as betting against a company? Because that's how it gets described, and it's not the only reason people hold them.
Buy a put and you hold the right to sell at a fixed price. You want the stock to fall so that selling at yesterday's higher price is worth something.
Bearish. And notice you can be bearish without ever borrowing or shorting anything, which is one real reason puts exist. And there's a reason to buy a put that has nothing to do with betting against a company, which is worth knowing because the exam frames it that way. Somebody who owns shares and wants protection can buy a put on them, so that if the price collapses, they still have the right to sell at the strike. That's insurance rather than speculation.
Then the 2 writing positions, which are simply the mirror images.
Write a call and you've promised to deliver shares at the strike. You keep the premium as long as nobody wants to buy at that price, so you want the stock flat or falling.
And write a put and you've promised to buy shares at the strike. You want the stock flat or rising so that nobody makes you buy at above the market.
So the buyer and the writer of the same contract always want opposite things.
Always, and that's the check. If you've worked out a position and both sides seem to want the same outcome, you've made an error somewhere.
Now the premium properly because it's the number every option question is secretly about.
And the arithmetic catches people out before the concepts do.
Professor Duran is back with us for this.
Start with the mechanics because they're the cheap marks. The premium is quoted per share and a standard contract covers 100 shares. So a premium of $2.20 is $220 for one contract.
And that 100 multiplier is where a careless answer goes wrong.
Constantly. A question will give you a per share premium and ask for the total cost, and the distractor will be the unmultiplied number sitting there looking correct.
And the non-refundable part?
It's what makes the maximum loss so clean for a buyer. You paid it, you can't get it back, and nothing further can be demanded of you. So the buyer's maximum loss is the premium on every long option position, without exception.
And the writer's maximum gain is the same number.
Exactly the same number seen from the other side, which is a useful symmetry. Whatever the buyer can lose at most, the writer can gain at most. The asymmetry is entirely in the other direction.
And notice how much of this is arithmetic rather than judgment, which is unusual for Section 2. Most of the products so far rewarded understanding a relationship. Options reward getting a multiplication right and reading which side of a number the stock is sitting on, and those are marks you can simply take.
And there's something about time here that we haven't said.
And it's the least intuitive part. An option has a deadline, so every day that passes with the stock unmoved makes the buyer's position worth less. Time is working against the buyer and for the writer continuously, whether or not anything happens.
And a small piece of vocabulary that questions lean on. An option is described as being in the money when exercising it would be worth doing, and out of the money when it wouldn't. You don't need to compute a value to answer most items. You need to know which side of the strike the stock is sitting on.
So a buyer can be right about the direction and still lose.
If they're right too slowly, yes. And that's worth saying plainly rather than leaving as a technicality, because it's how a great many people who buy options lose money while believing they had analyzed the company correctly. Being right about the company isn't sufficient. You also had to be right about when.
Professor Duran, thank you. Right about the direction and wrong about the timing still being a loss is the caution I'd want alongside the arithmetic. So the routine for an options question, which is 2 questions and 1 multiplication.
First, which side of the contract is the question about? A buyer holds a right and risks only the premium. A writer holds an obligation and collects it.
Second, call or put. A call is the right to buy at the strike. A put is the right to sell at the strike.
Put those 2 together and the position, the outlook, and the maximum loss all fall out without a memorized table.
And a note on how to drill this one, because it's different from the bond episodes. Bond questions rewarded reasoning. Option questions reward drawing the position out on paper before you read the answers, because 2 of the 4 choices will be the mirror position, and they look identical when you're rushing.
And whenever the question asks for money, multiply the per-share premium by 100.
There's a real objection to how we've taught this, though, and it should be said before anybody walks away confident.
Make it.
We've made options sound tidy. 2 questions, 1 multiplication. But everything we covered today is the first layer, and the SIE does test combinations, coverage, and the writing positions where the arithmetic stops being friendly. A person who leaves here thinking options are handled is going to be surprised.
And the counter is that the first layer is genuinely most of what gets asked at this level, and building it solidly is how the later material becomes learnable rather than terrifying. And one more thing worth carrying into the next episode. Every position we drew today assumed the buyer or writer holds nothing else. The moment somebody already owns the underlying shares, the risk arithmetic changes completely, and that single difference is most of what makes the next episode harder.
Both are right. Take today as the foundation rather than the whole building, and expect the next options episode to be harder rather than more of the same. Next time we stay with options and do the positions properly, covered against naked writing and what maximum loss actually means when you already own the shares. If one thing survives today, make it the word right. An option owner may act and may walk away, and the most they can lose is what they paid for that choice.
And the writer took the money and kept the duty.
If you're working toward this exam, subscribing keeps the course arriving in order, and the free practice sets on the site now cover the options basics. So before you go, tell me, did you know you could be right about a stock and still lose on the option? Go and draw the 4 positions from the 2 questions. This is Bella, and I will see you in episode 26.